In a quiet town nestled under the shadow of a forest, there was a house that every child whispered about on Halloween. It was the old Stone Manor on Willow Lane, a towering structure with ivy creeping up its stone walls and windows that seemed to stare out like watchful eyes. But the most curious thing about the house was the ghost story that surrounded it. A tale of love lost and found in the most mysterious of ways. No one had lived in the house for years. Most people believed it was haunted. For every Halloween, a candle would flicker to life in the topmost window, and a soft melody would drift down to the street below. The townsfolk said it was the ghost of Eleanor Stone, a young woman who had died on Halloween night nearly a century ago, waiting for the return of her beloved. Legend had it that Eleanor had fallen deeply in love with a traveling musician named Thomas. He had promised to come back for her, to take her away from the confines of her sheltered life, but he never returned. Some said he had met a tragic fate on his journey. Others believed he had simply forgotten her. Heartbroken, Eleanor had spent her days waiting, her love unyielding even after her death. And so, on Halloween night, she would appear at the window, singing a haunting melody, as if calling out to him from beyond the veil. Emma, a young woman with a passion for history and mysteries, had heard the tale countless times growing up. Every Halloween, she would pass by the Stone Manor, drawn to it like a moth to a flame. Her imagination alight with images of Eleanor waiting, hoping, yearning. And this year, she decided to investigate for herself. Dressed in a warm coat and scarf, Emma made her way down Willow Lane as the sky darkened. She carried a flashlight and a small notebook to record anything she found, her heart pounding with excitement and a touch of fear. The streets were empty, the children having long since retreated with bags of candy, and an eerie silence filled the air. As she approached the manor, she noticed a faint glow in the topmost window, a flickering candle, just as the legend said. Her breath caught, but she forced herself to continue, pushing open the rusty gate and stepping onto the overgrown path leading to the door. The door creaked open, as if inviting her in, and she hesitated only a moment before stepping inside. The air was thick with dust and the scent of old wood, and her footsteps echoed through the empty halls. She climbed the grand staircase, her flashlight illuminating faded portraits of long-gone ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow her as she passed. When she reached the top floor, she paused. There was the faintest sound of music, so soft it was almost inaudible. Her heart raced as she followed the sound, leading her to a small room at the end of the hallway. The door was slightly ajar, and inside, she could see the flickering candle on a table beside an old grand piano. But it wasn't the candle or the piano that caught her attention. It was the figure standing by the window. A young man, his form translucent and pale, stood gazing out at the darkened street below. He was dressed in clothes from another era, his hair slightly tousled, and a look of deep sorrow etched on his face. Emma's breath caught as she realized who he must be. "Thomas," she whispered, stepping into the room. The figure turned, his eyes widening as they met hers. You can see me?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper, filled with surprise and hope. Emma nodded, her heart pounding. I didn't think anyone was here. Are you waiting for Eleanor?" The ghostly figure nodded, his gaze drifting back to the window. "I was on my way back to her, but I never made it. I was robbed on the road, left for dead in the forest. My spirit was bound here, drawn to her love, but she never knew. Every Halloween I appear, hoping she'll see me, hoping she'll understand." Emma felt a pang of sorrow. She had always thought the story was tragic, but seeing Thomas before her, his love and regret palpable, made it all the more heartbreaking. "She's been waiting for you too," Emma said softly. "She's still here somewhere, waiting for you to come back." The candle flickered, and a sudden chill filled the room. Emma turned, and there, Standing beside the piano was a young woman with a sad, haunting beauty. Her long hair cascaded down her back, and she wore a pale, flowing dress, her eyes filled with longing. "Eleanor," Emma breathed, feeling as though she were intruding on an intimate moment. Eleanor's gaze shifted from Emma to Thomas, her eyes widening as she took in the sight of the man she had waited for all these years. "Thomas," she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief and a glimmer of hope. He stepped forward, reaching out to her, though his hand passed through hers like mist. "Eleanor, I'm so sorry. I tried to come back to you. I wanted to take you away, just like I promised." Tears glistened in Eleanor's eyes as she gazed at him, her hand hovering near his, even though they couldn't truly touch. "I never stopped waiting," she whispered. "I loved you then, and I love you still." Emma watched, feeling the weight of their love and their loss, the years of waiting and hoping. She could feel their bond, their devotion, and in that moment, she felt a strange sense of peace wash over the room. "You don't have to wait anymore," she said gently, her voice breaking the silence. "You found each other." Thomas and Eleanor shared a final, longing gaze, and slowly, their forms began to fade, a soft glow surrounding them as they drifted closer together. For a brief moment, it was as if they were whole, their hands finally clasped, their faces filled with love and peace. And then, with a final soft whisper, they disappeared, leaving the room empty and silent once more. Emma stood alone, the candle's flame flickering out, casting the room into darkness. She felt a tear slip down her cheek, a mixture of sorrow and joy filling her heart. She had witnessed something beautiful, a love that had transcended time, a haunting that had finally found peace. As she left the house and walked down Willow Lane, she looked back at the darkened window, a soft smile on her face. She knew the townsfolk would continue to tell the story of the Stone Manor, but this time, she would keep the truth to herself. The house was no longer haunted. Love had found its way home.